the United States and the People's Republic of China, the world's strongest superpowers. Each with a rich sense of history and culture, but quite different visions for the future. Why are they arch rivals? To dive deeper, let's take a look at the facts. After centuries as the world's largest economy, China fell behind in industrialization and lost wars, territory, and concessions to Western and Japanese colonial powers starting in the 1800s, the so-called Century of Humiliation. The U.S. supported China against Japan in World War II, but when the 1949 Chinese Communist Revolution made the U.S.-backed government flee to Taiwan, the U.S. recognized Taiwan rather than the newly formed People's Republic of China, or PRC, as the legitimate government of the Chinese state. In 1972, after the Sino-Soviet split, U.S. President Richard Nixon visited China, thawing the frosty relationship between the PRC and the U.S. By 1979, diplomatic relations were normalized, and Washington let Beijing, rather than Taiwan, represent China at the UN. The U.S. supported China's 2001 admission to the World Trade Organization, but during the Obama administration, the U.S. began re-engaging with the Asia-Pacific region to counter China's growing clout. The Trump administration launched genocide accusations, as well as tariffs on Chinese goods. Both have been maintained by the Biden administration, which deepened ties with Australia, India, and Japan, forming the Quad to curb China's rise. The U.S. overtook China as the world's largest economy around 1890, but now arguably risks losing this lead and its supremacy on the global stage. The global rivalry between the U.S. and China and their divergent political and economic systems is often compared to the U.S.-Soviet Cold War, but deep economic ties make the PRC-U.S. rivalry more complex. One of the main areas of competition is in technology, as the PRC tries to supplant the U.S. as the global leader in tech. The U.S. has been working to decouple its supply chains from China, accusing Beijing of espionage and intellectual property theft, and imposing sanctions on leading Chinese tech companies such as Huawei, as well as limiting the sale of semiconductors to China. In response, China has reaffirmed its ambitions to achieve self-sufficiency in tech. The U.S. has long accused the PRC of committing human rights abuses. Beijing has dismissed this as propaganda and leveled the same criticism against the U.S., while Washington shines a light on the alleged persecution of ethnic minorities, including denouncing what it calls a genocide against Muslim Uyghurs. Beijing argues that COVID figures, gun violence, poverty, and corruption show the indifference of the U.S. establishment toward its people's well-being. Although Nixon's 1972 visit produced a joint U.S.-China communique stating that Chinese on either side of the Taiwan Strait maintain there is but one China and that Taiwan is a part of China. Differing interpretations of this one China policy have made Taiwan a major flashpoint. Although the island has been self-ruled since 1949 and democratic since 1996, the PRC insists that it belongs to China and should eventually be reunified. In contrast, the U.S. supports Taiwan's right to self-defense and has a policy of strategic ambiguity as to whether it would defend Taiwan militarily against a Chinese invasion. Tensions are regularly inflamed by Chinese naval drills and military flights near Taiwan, as well as by U.S. freedom of navigation exercises, arms sales, and visits by high-profile politicians.
China's armed forces yesterday sent a large number of military aircraft and naval vessels into our vicinity. Their actions threaten Taiwan and other like-minded countries in the region. As president, I want to tell you that Taiwan is not intimidated.
There are three main narratives that define the tension between the U.S. and China: the anti-China narrative, the pro-China narrative, and the cynical narrative. The anti-China narrative states that the Chinese Communist Party has crushed Hong Kong's democracy, created Orwellian surveillance, and perpetrated human rights abuses, including genocide of the Uyghur people. The PRC is a security threat to every democratic, freedom-loving country. It seeks to dominate the world through military aggression, economic and technological espionage, and corruption of foreign politicians to spread its dystopian, authoritarian model across the globe. The U.S. must counter these threats and contain China. The pro-China narrative states that the U.S. is trying to harm China's economy, discredit it, and draw it into regional conflicts. U.S. talk of democracy and human rights are mere excuses for this, since it supports many non-democratic governments. The real reason is Washington fears losing its leadership and dominance and wants to distract from domestic problems by scapegoating China. Chinese weakness let Western colonialists humiliate it in the 1800s, and China won't make that mistake again. The cynical narrative states that a conflict wouldn't benefit either side, and all this talk about defeating China is irrelevant. In fact, U.S. policies to counter the PRC increasingly expose the fact that the American political establishment is seeking to follow the Chinese model, not promote U.S. values.